Hello, everyone. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon, June 19th, 2022, and we're here to talk about what's on everyone's mind right now, the biggest political issue of the day, the elephant in the room, so to speak, and that is, of course, inflation. So, inflation is the biggest issue right now, the biggest concern on the minds of people. It manifests itself mostly, or I should say, the single most salient manifestation of it, in a deleterious way, of course, is gas prices. So, if you remember, during the Trump administration, during the height of the pandemic, we had gas prices. I don't even remember the prices. I know it was $2 something. Right now, it's $4.80. So it more than doubled, or it doubled, right? Whatever. Now that is huge. I mean, think about any other goods or services that doubled. Nothing. I mean, does a car cost twice as much? Does food cost twice as much? Gas costs twice as much. So that is a very, very big number. And gas happens to be one of those commodities that everyone needs. There is no such thing as somebody who doesn't need. I mean, you could, at least in theory, you could survive without a car. Even indirectly, that is, right? You could live. Of course, directly surviving without a car is easy, right? You just, you know, you buy things you live in a big city and you just have things delivered. But that's indirectly, things that are delivered by car, right? But you can even survive without a car. Even indirect. I mean, you could just plainly never drive one, never order a taxi, live in a city, never use a train. So you're not consuming any of that fossil fuel. You're still indirectly consuming some fossil fuel, of course, which is my point, which is that fossil fuel is really the blood of our economy. It's absolutely inconceivable that we should have anything even remotely resembling the lifestyle that we have without gas, without petroleum products. I'm not even talking about the plastics that are made out of petroleum. Forget about that part. I'm talking about the energy component of it, right? Everything is energy driven. Electricity right now is mostly generated through fossil fuels. So not just transportation, of course, which is mainly fossil fuels, but even electricity is fossil fuels. All the power that we get is fossil fuel driven. And yeah, is there some wind energy? Is there some solar energy? Yeah, some. But not in any significant number. Anyway, so this is a very serious matter. Inflation is a very serious problem. Why? For two obvious reasons. One is that it puts the squeeze on consumers, right? Now they have to pay more and they don't have more. So you're going to tell me, oh, but the government created all this money and they gave people all this money, which is, of course, the reason why, at least in part, why there is inflation and why the gas prices went up. But the problem, though, is, which brings me to the second point, is that inflation at this level, at this rate, creates a certain uncertainty, and it changes people's consumptive behavior, and it actually also changes people's working behavior. In other words, the amount they expect to be compensated also changes based on this. So there's a certain expectation that inflation will continue, which modifies people's behavior and what they expect out of work and out of consuming goods and services. Like one way, for example, that it modifies people's behavior is that if you have money sitting in the bank, then you're gonna be, if you believe that inflation is gonna continue at this rate, you're gonna advance certain consumptive purchases, right, that you're looking to purchase. You're gonna advance it, meaning you're gonna purchase it sooner rather than later, because if you wait, it's gonna cost you more, and you have the cash anyway, so you might as well buy it now. So remember, the government gave people a lot of money, so those people who are less apt to spend immediately, they have this money sitting in the bank, and now this actually amplifies inflation, because now these people want to buy even more than they would normally buy, for the sole reason that if the money that the government gave them last year or 2 years ago, if that money stays in the bank, it's just losing value, and they're going to have to pay more when they purchase those essential goods and services later. So that actually stimulates the economy even further, which creates even more inflation, because now there's even a greater squeeze on goods and services and more money that is in circulation and is being used to consume those goods and services. So, so what we want to talk about in this monologue is we want to talk about what caused all of this inflation, and is there some mistake that we made, both in retrospect and at the time, was it a mistake? And lastly, a third question is what can be done to alleviate inflation? So, question one, what caused it? So there are two components, of course. One is, as we hinted to earlier, one is the economy is flush with a lot of cash. People have the money. And the flip side component is there isn't enough goods and services available. So what happens is the prices go up because the cash is there, right? The cash to spend it is there, but the goods and services aren't there. You know, like for example, everyone wants to buy whatever. They want to buy cars, right? But there aren't enough cars. They all have the money to buy it, but there just aren't enough cars to give to the people who want to buy it. So what does the car dealer do? They just raise the price. So now they make more money, and at the same time they can fill all the demand out there in the market. So that's a natural thing that happens in open markets. I mean, unless the government controls the prices, then this is naturally going to happen in a situation where there's more cash and fewer goods and services available. So that's a simple answer. How and why was there a cash influx in the economy? Of course, we know the answer to that. That's the pandemic stimulus that both Trump and Biden engaged in. Biden, of course, put it on overdrive. I mean, I got maybe 1 or 2 checks under Trump. And then from Biden, I got another 4 or 5 checks. I mean, each of them $500. And I didn't even need it. I never asked for it. I never even wanted it. You know, I wasn't in that situation that I needed it. First of all, I was never affected by the pandemic in the first place. But even if I were, I just didn't need the cash. I could survive without it. I could just weather that downside in the economy. And there are millions of people like me who like me, they didn't need it, and they got the money anyway. And then they gave them all these crazy loans, what's called PPP or whatever. So now businesses, same thing happens with businesses. Now you're stimulating these businesses, right? They have all of this cash coming in. And so not only on the consumer level, but also on the business level, now they are willing to spend money, but the services are not being produced because they laid everyone off. They said, the media and the government, they scared. Fauci went on TV. Hey, you got to be careful. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't mingle. You can't go in public. You got to work from home. You got to do this and you got to do that. So all of that dampened and slowed down the economy in terms of the workers producing goods and services. So that's a very natural result. The fact that the government couldn't foresee this it's incredibly striking that nobody talked about the possibility of inflation when the government was doing all of this. Even though this is just economics 101. You're shutting out all the goods and services down, you're giving people a lot of money, there's gonna be rapid runaway inflation. It's simple math, and no one talked about it, as if it's not going to happen or as if we need not be concerned about it, etc. So that's what caused it. So second question, what can we do about it? Oh, could it have been avoidable? And the answer is, of course. We didn't have to do what we did. I forgot to mention the extension of unemployment. That was also worth many, many billions, tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that the government spent on extending unemployment, boosting the unemployment and prolonging it and all of that. So that discouraged people from working. And this was silly at the time even. It was crazy. It didn't make any sense at all. There was no need to begin with. There was never any need. The people who got laid off, they got laid off. First of all, they have existing unemployment that lasts a good few weeks. most people have saved. There's very few people who are really, really in a pinch, and even those people, they can still go on food stamps and other government services, local or family. You know, this was really a mirage. This whole idea that due to the restrictions of the pandemic, there's going to be millions of people suffering was just never true in the first place. Of course, we didn't have to shut down. That's also not true, but I'm not going to go into that. Assuming that that was important, shutting down everything and laying off people, we still didn't have to do the stimulus to the extent that we did it. We didn't have to do it at all, but certainly not to the tune of trillions of dollars. That wasn't appropriate. So even at the time, it wasn't suitable, and even at the time, I was against it. Again, both administrations are to blame here. Trump did it, and Biden did it on overdrive. He did round 2 and round 3 and round 4, and even more stimulus for no good reason. And thank goodness the BBB failed, Build Back Better, because then we would have had even worse inflation. So even at the time it was wrong, but certainly in retrospect, looking back, that was not a bright idea to do all of this stimulus spending. Okay, so what can we do right now about it? So now we're already in an inflationary cycle here, and it's a vicious cycle, as we have intimated earlier. Like I said, people anticipate the prices to go up, so they are purchasing in advance, and which causes even greater dearth in goods and services, because now people are buying more than they would have otherwise been apt to buy. So what can be done right now about it? So the first thing obvious is that we need to stop stimulating the economy. So what that means is the government should stop borrowing money. Whatever programs exist should be curtailed, they should be rescinded, they should be halted. Stop spending money, stop giving people more money, stop giving people tax credits, stop sending them checks for no good reason. Don't stop encouraging people not to work. We need people to work to create the goods and services that consumers want to buy. So if you're doing any type of incentive in the government to discourage work, we need to stop that. Okay, so again, limit the amount of money in the economy by stopping the stimulation of the economy, stopping all of that. Encourage people to work. Okay. Number 3, the Fed needs to raise the interest rate. Okay. Right now, there's a lot of the money that the government gave to people induced people to purchase homes, and a type of speculative real estate market emerged, where people are buying because they're believing that the prices will go up even further, and so on. And so right now, of course, and I live in Florida, I live here in Riverview, and pre-pandemic, my house was worth $250. It was worth like that from the day I purchased it in 2017. It held steady, and I was very disappointed. Like, when is it going to start going up? And then suddenly, over the course of the pandemic, it went up from $255. Ran up by $200,000. It's incredible. Again, it doubled, almost doubled. And my house is probably worth $450 right now. I can sell it for $450. I did some minor improvements here and there, but mostly it's just the real estate that went up. And so why is it worth that much? Again, people have money. They're willing to spend. They're moving away from northern states for a host of reasons, which we're not going to go into right now in this monologue. But they're trying to move down here, and they're willing to have the money to spend on it. And so that's just how markets work. A lot of people willing to spend X amount of money, and there isn't a lot of that service or product available, and so the prices go up. And so we need to stop that. Raise the interest rates. That limits the amount of people in the market to purchase houses, because a lot of people can't afford. With the higher interest rates, that means higher mortgage payments each month, and if they can't, they have a certain fixed number that they can afford based on their income. So, so that eases the run on real estate. So we have these 3 things that we can do, which is limit the currency in circulation, encourage people to work, raise the interest rates, and the last thing that I want to point out here is that we need to be cautious when we do all of these anti-inflationary measures. We shouldn't go overboard, because actually deflation is worse than inflation. So if you pay close attention to economics and to inflation, you know that inflation is pretty normative. It has happened over since time immemorial. It has gone up. Every year there's been a 2% inflation has been normal, and that's completely normal. There's nothing abnormal, aberrant about that. That's good, in fact. For a variety of reasons, I don't want to go into it right now. In fact, I don't even understand it fully, but for whatever reason, inflation is okay to a very limited extent. Deflation, part of the reason why inflation is okay to a limited extent is because if we don't inflate, then there is actually a risk of deflation. And deflation creates all kinds of other problems that are actually even worse than inflation. So in other words, if the economy were to inflate by 2% a year rather than deflate 2% a year, that's actually a better result. So part of the, so like I said, it's actually good that we're having inflation rather than deflation. I say this, a similar thing about people being overweight. Now, a lot of people say that those who are gloomy about the overweight problem in the American society nowadays, they say, oh, years ago there weren't people overweight, other societies were not overweight, we're healthier, we're better. And of course they have a point, but it's also worth keeping in mind that if you had 2/3 of the Americans that were underweight rather than overweight, right now we have 2/3 of the Americans who are either overweight or obese. If you had the reverse, you would have a much, much worse problem, right? You would have people who just don't have the energy to go about their daily lives and do their things that they need to do. So they would be at risk for all sorts of diseases, by the way, because they just their bodies don't have the energy. They don't have the stored up energy. When you get sick, you draw on those stored fats and energy to get you through the ordeal. So we would have an even unhealthier population if it was exactly the mirror image of that, which is 2/3 of the population underweight. So in other words, if you want to err in one way or another, you'd rather be 10 pounds or 20 or whatever it is, 30 pounds overweight rather than 30 pounds underweight. Okay? So, and it's the same thing here. You'd rather have inflation than deflation. So we need to be careful not to overdo whatever we're doing. And of course, for that, you have the government. They have very sophisticated models and people in charge. And hopefully they're doing their job this time, because during the pandemic, they were not doing their jobs. They didn't sound the alarm. They let the government spend. They let us shut down the employment, fire people, lay them off, all in the service of shutting down the pandemic, which of course they failed to do. It's a completely different topic. But of course, they never shut down the coronavirus. It just kept raging, and because it's not shuttable, you can't shut down the virus. Like yeah. All right. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a great week. Bye-bye.